Imagine waking up in a hospital bed, weak and bleeding, only to find out the man you trusted most has vanished. The home you built together is no longer yours, and the world believes a lie, that you abandoned your family. But the truth is darker, deeper, and far more heartbreaking. This is the story of Sarah, a mother who lost everything in one night, and found the strength to fight back when no one believed in her. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment where you're watching from. There are some stories that don't begin with tragedy, but with a dream so bright you'd never think it could shatter. This one starts in a quiet little Nevada town, where the desert stretched wide under the burning sun and the nights lit up with stars so clear you could almost touch them. Sarah Miller was the kind of woman people admired without even realizing it. She wasn't loud or flashy. She wasn't someone who needed to be the center of attention, but she carried herself with a softness that made people feel safe. She was young, glowing with that kind of hope you only see in women who believe their whole future is opening up ahead of them. Sarah married David Miller when she was 24. David came from money. His family ran a chain of car dealerships across Nevada, and he had grown up in privilege. Sarah didn't care much about his wealth. What drew her in was the way he spoke when they first met, how he promised her security, how he made her laugh, and how he looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. She believed him. She believed every word, because she wanted so badly to build a home where love mattered most. First, it seemed like she had everything she wanted. The Miller house was large, a modern home built near the edge of the desert, with glass windows that caught the light at sunset. Sarah filled that home with warmth. She cooked dinner every night, even when she didn't have to. She decorated with little things that made her feel grounded. Family photos, potted plants, soft blankets draped over the couch. She dreamed of the children they would raise there, the birthdays they would celebrate, the Christmas mornings with laughter spilling down the hallway. When she found out she was pregnant, Sarah thought her happiness had reached its peak. Twins, the doctor said, smiling as Sarah stared wide-eyed at the ultrasound. 2 little lives growing inside her. She couldn't wait to tell David. She imagined he would lift her up in his arms, spin her around, maybe even cry tears of joy. That night, she lit candles on the dinner table and made his favorite meal, grilled steak with mashed potatoes. She wanted the moment to be perfect. But perfection didn't come. When she told him, David's reaction was not the one she imagined. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He didn't even hug her. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, staring at her like the news was more of a burden than a blessing. Twins, he said slowly. That's a lot. Sarah forced a smile, her heart sinking. Yes, but it's wonderful, isn't it? We're going to be a family. David nodded, but his eyes were distant. Yeah, a family. In that moment, Sarah pushed away her unease. She told herself he was just shocked, that he needed time to process. But deep down, something small and cold began to whisper in her heart. Maybe his love wasn't as deep as hers. The months passed, and her pregnancy grew heavier. Sarah expected David to be by her side at doctor appointments, to rub her back when the pain was too much, to talk to the babies in her belly at night. Instead, David grew more absent. He worked late. He went on business trips that stretched longer than they should. When he was home, he scrolled through his phone, distracted, or he snapped at her when she asked for help. Sarah tried to hold the pieces together. She reminded herself of the man she first fell in love with, the man who once charmed her with his promises. But each day, the distance between them grew wider. One evening, Sarah noticed something that broke her in ways she couldn't explain. She was folding baby clothes in the nursery they had prepared, tiny socks and soft blankets stacked neatly. David came in, speaking on his phone. He didn't see her standing there. His voice was low, hushed, and filled with a tenderness she hadn't heard in months. "Don't worry," he whispered into the phone. "I'll be there soon. You're the one I want." Sarah froze, the tiny socks slipping from her hands onto the floor. Her breath caught in her throat. She knew that voice, that softness. It was the voice he used to use with her. But it wasn't hers anymore. She didn't say anything that night. She wanted to believe she was wrong. She wanted to believe she had misunderstood. But the truth has a way of revealing itself, no matter how hard you try to hide from it. A few days later, Sarah drove into town to pick up groceries. As she walked past a cafe window, she stopped dead in her tracks. Inside, at a corner table, sat David. And across from him, laughing, touching his hand, was Amanda Lewis, a woman Sarah had seen around town. Amanda was everything Sarah was not. Bold, flirtatious, with sharp red lipstick and a way of carrying herself that drew attention. Sarah stared through the glass, her heart splintering, as her husband leaned forward and kissed Amanda's hand like she was the love of his life. That night, Sarah confronted him. She stood in the living room, her belly heavy, her hands trembling. "David, who is Amanda?" He didn't deny it. He didn't even look ashamed. He just sighed like her question was an annoyance. "She's someone who understands me. Someone who isn't dragging me down." "Dragging you down?" Sarah's voice broke. "I'm carrying your children, David. Our children." He looked at her then, and the coldness in his eyes was something she would never forget. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for twins. I didn't ask for you to make my life harder." Sarah's knees buckled, but she held herself upright, refusing to let him see her collapse. "You promised me forever." David shrugged. "People change. Feelings change. I don't love you anymore, Sarah. You should leave before this gets uglier." Leave. The word echoed in her mind like thunder. How could he tell her to leave when she had nowhere to go, when she was weeks away from giving birth, when she had given him everything? But David didn't care. That night, he packed a bag and walked out the door, leaving her standing alone in the home she had once filled with dreams. The days after his departure were some of the darkest Sarah had ever known. Her body was heavy, aching, and she struggled to even make it down the stairs. She had no family close by. Her parents had passed years ago, and her only sibling lived states away, barely able to make ends meet herself. Sarah had friends, but she was too ashamed to tell them the truth. So she stayed silent. David didn't just leave her physically. He began poisoning her reputation in town. He told people she had gone unstable, that she had driven him away, that she was irresponsible and unfit to be a mother. The lies spread quickly. Neighbors who once waved at her now looked at her with pity or suspicion. The world seemed to turn against her, just when she needed it most. And yet, through the pain, through the betrayal, Sarah held on to one thing: her babies. She would talk to them at night, her hands resting on her swollen belly. "Don't worry, my loves," she whispered through tears. "I'll take care of you. I'll protect you no matter what." But promises are fragile things when the world decides to test them. And Sarah had no idea just how much she was about to be tested. Because the night her labor pains began, David and Amanda would drive past her on a dark Nevada road, laughing, headlights flashing across her broken figure as she begged for help. And instead of stopping, instead of reaching out, they would leave her there in the dirt, alone and fighting for life, for hers and her babies. That moment was coming. And when it did, Sarah's world would shatter completely. But it would also be the moment a new story began. The story of a woman who refused to let betrayal define her. The story of survival that would carry her far beyond the desert night. The night the pain began was colder than most Nevada nights. The desert could fool you like that. Scorching heat by day, bitter cold by night. Sarah had been tossing in bed, clutching her stomach as the contractions tightened around her like waves that wouldn't let her breathe. She was alone in the big, empty house, the silence pressing on her ears. She tried to tell herself it was too early, that maybe she still had time before the babies came, but her body told her otherwise. She staggered to her phone and called David. The ring buzzed in her ear, one after another, until it went to voicemail. Her voice cracked as she left a message. "David, please, it's time. The babies are coming. I need help." She waited, prayed he would hear the desperation and come. But minutes passed. No answer. She tried calling again and again. Nothing. Finally she sent a text, her fingers trembling over the screen. "Please. I can't do this alone." But if David read it, he didn't care. Clutching her belly, Sarah tried to make her way outside. The house that once felt safe now felt like a cage. She thought if she could just reach the road, maybe someone would pass by, maybe she'd find help. Every step felt like fire running up her spine. She could barely breathe. Sweat poured down her face even though the night air bit at her skin. She reached the dirt road just as headlights appeared in the distance. Relief surged through her. Maybe this was it. Maybe she wouldn't be alone. She waved her arms, screaming through the pain. As the car drew closer, her heart froze. She knew that car. It was David's black SUV. And when the headlights finally lit her face, she saw him in the driver's seat, Amanda laughing beside him. "David!" she screamed, stumbling into the road, her voice hoarse with desperation. "Please, I need you. The babies are coming." The SUV slowed for a moment, just enough that she thought he might stop. Their eyes met through the windshield, her face contorted with agony, his expression unreadable in the glow of the headlights. Then, like a nightmare, the engine roared and David pressed the gas. The tires spun against the dirt, and a spray of mud splashed across her dress. Amanda's laughter rang out, sharp and cruel, as the car sped past into the night. Sarah collapsed to her knees in the road, the taste of dust filling her mouth. Her cries echoed in the emptiness, swallowed by the desert. Betrayal had a sound, and it was the receding hum of that SUV leaving her behind. Her body gave her no mercy. The contractions tore through her, wave after wave, until she couldn't move. She fell to her side, clutching her belly, tears streaming down her face. "Please, God," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't let my babies die. Don't let me die." And there, on the side of that lonely Nevada road, under a sky full of stars that seemed too cruel to shine, Sarah Miller gave birth to her twins. The first baby came weak, his tiny cries barely audible over her own sobs. The second came stronger, his cry piercing the night like a small but fierce declaration of life. Sarah held them against her chest, her body trembling, her mind fading. She didn't even have the strength to tear the blanket she had carried with her. She wrapped them as best she could in her torn dress, shivering as the cold bit into them. One baby whimpered softly, the other grew still. Panic clawed at her throat. "No, no, no, stay with me," she begged, rocking them with what little strength she had left. She was losing blood. She knew it. The world around her was spinning, her vision blurring. She thought about her parents, about the life she once dreamed of, about the promises that had turned to ashes. She thought this might be the end. But fate wasn't finished with her yet. In the distance, another set of headlights appeared. For a moment, Sarah thought she was imagining it. She tried to cry out, but her voice was barely more than a whisper. The lights drew closer, then slowed. A truck pulled to the side of the road, dust swirling around it. A man jumped out, his boots hitting the dirt. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair tucked under a worn baseball cap. His eyes widened as they fell on the scene before him. Sarah, bloodied and weak, clutching two tiny newborns to her chest. "Oh my God," he muttered, rushing toward her. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Sarah tried to speak, but only a broken sob came out. She lifted the babies weakly toward him, as if to say, "Help them first." The man knelt beside her, pulling off his jacket and wrapping it around the infants. "It's okay, I've got you. You're safe now. Hold on." His voice was steady, firm, the kind of voice that cut through chaos like an anchor. He scooped Sarah and the babies into his arms and carried them to his truck. "Stay with me, don't close your eyes," he urged, glancing at her pale face. She tried to focus on his voice, but everything was slipping away. The hum of the engine, the rumble of the tires, his voice telling her she wasn't alone. Those were the last things she remembered before the darkness pulled her under. When she woke, she was lying on a narrow bed, the air filled with the smell of antiseptic. A soft light glowed above her. For a moment she thought she was dreaming. Then she heard it, 2 faint cries, one stronger than the other, but both alive. She turned her head, tears welling in her eyes, and saw a nurse rocking her babies gently nearby. "They made it," the nurse said softly, smiling at her. "You all made it." Sarah's body ached, but her heart swelled with relief. Her babies were alive. Against all odds they had survived. The man from the roadside appeared in the doorway then, his hat in his hands. He looked almost shy, despite the fact that he had saved her life. "Hey," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to scare you earlier. My name's Ethan Walker. I found you out there." Sarah tried to sit up, her voice hoarse. You saved us." Ethan shook his head. "No, you saved them. You held on. I just happened to be passing by." But Sarah knew better. If he hadn't stopped, if he hadn't lifted her off that road, she and her babies would have died. "Thank you," she whispered, her tears spilling over. "Thank you." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, like he didn't know how to take gratitude. "Don't thank me yet. You've still got a fight ahead of you. But you're not alone anymore." Those words stayed with her. You're not alone anymore. For the first time in weeks, Sarah let herself believe it. But even as relief settled over her, the shadow of David's betrayal still loomed. She knew he would not stop. He had already abandoned her, already humiliated her. Now that she had survived, she would have to face the lies, the shame, and the battle of raising 2 children in a world that had turned its back on her. And yet, for the first time, Sarah felt a spark of strength inside her. A strength she didn't know she had. A strength that would carry her through the storm ahead. Because betrayal may have broken her, but it had also given birth to something else. Resilience. And resilience, Sarah was about to learn, was stronger than any cruelty David Miller could ever throw at her. The first weeks after Sarah left the clinic were the hardest days she had ever known. Her body was still weak, her hands trembling when she tried to hold her babies, and her heart was torn between joy that they were alive and grief that their father had chosen betrayal over love. She named them Jacob and Lily. Jacob was the smaller one, fragile and quiet, while Lily's cries were strong, almost demanding, as if she had come into the world ready to fight. Sarah had no home now. David had locked the doors of the house they once shared and told the staff not to let her in. Her clothes, her photos, everything she once owned was gone. She stayed in a small, run-down apartment on the edge of town, with peeling paint on the walls and a heater that rattled all night. It wasn't the dream home she once imagined for her family, but it was a roof, and it was all she could afford. The nights were long. Both babies woke constantly, crying for milk, their tiny lungs filling the silence. Sarah sat in the dim glow of a lamp, her eyes heavy, her body aching, rocking one baby in her arms while the other cried in the crib. Sometimes she cried too, her tears soaking the baby's blankets. She whispered promises to them even when she didn't know how she would keep them. "I'll never leave you. I'll protect you. I'll give you the life you deserve." Food was scarce. Money was tighter than ever. David had cut her off completely, freezing their joint account and telling anyone who asked that she had abandoned him. He claimed she had chosen to leave him and the children, spinning lies that painted himself as the victim. And the worst part, people believed him. In a town like theirs, gossip spread faster than wildfire. Sarah heard the whispers at the grocery store when she bought formula with the little money she had. She saw the way people looked at her, pity in some eyes, judgment in others. One woman muttered to her friend as Sarah passed, "That's the one who ran off on her husband and kids." Sarah wanted to scream to tell them the truth, but her voice felt trapped inside her. David was careful. He had money, power, and charm. To outsiders, he looked like a grieving man doing his best. Amanda, always by his side, wore smug smiles, as if she had already taken Sarah's place completely. Together, they told the story of a reckless wife who couldn't handle responsibility, who left her children to chase her own selfish dreams. And since Sarah never spoke out, their lies became the truth everyone accepted. But in the quiet of her apartment, surrounded by Jacob and Lily, Sarah knew the real story. She knew the truth written in her scars, in the way she had bled on that road, in the way her children had fought to breathe in her arms. The truth was hers, and though she stayed silent now, she promised herself one day it would be heard. In those early months, Ethan Walker became the one steady presence in her life. He didn't push himself into her world, but he was there, checking in, bringing groceries when she had nothing, fixing the leaky faucet in her apartment without being asked. He never treated her with pity. Instead, he treated her with respect, like she was still whole, even though she felt broken. Sometimes, when she was too exhausted to hold herself together, Ethan would sit on the old couch in her apartment, cradling Jacob in his big hands, humming softly until the baby drifted to sleep. Sarah would watch him from across the room, her heart aching with gratitude and fear all at once. Gratitude that he cared, fear that she might start to depend on him too much. She had trusted a man before. She knew what it cost when that trust shattered. Still, Ethan never asked for anything in return. One night, when Sarah finally broke down, confessing through tears how much she hated the whispers, how scared she was of failing as a mother, Ethan listened quietly. When she finished, he said in his steady voice, "You don't owe anyone an explanation. You just have to keep moving forward. For them." He nodded toward the sleeping twins. "And for yourself." Those words lit something inside her. She realized she couldn't spend her life hiding in the shadow of David's lies. She had to stand no matter how hard it was and build something new. Started small. Sarah had always been good with her hands, sewing little things here and there. One afternoon, while Lily slept and Jacob fussed softly in his crib, Sarah sat at the old sewing machine Ethan had found for her at a thrift store. She stitched tiny baby clothes out of scraps of fabric. They weren't perfect, but they were hers. Soon she began making more. Soft blankets, little dresses, shirts. She posted them online under the name Desert Rose Creations, not expecting much. To her surprise, orders began trickling in. At first, it was only neighbors or strangers who stumbled across her page. Then someone left a glowing review, sharing how much love they felt in the handmade clothes. Slowly, Sarah's business grew. She worked late into the night, her sewing machine humming while the twins slept nearby. For the first time since David left, she felt purpose. But growth didn't come without struggle. There were days when she wanted to give up, when the bills piled high and her hands ached from sewing. There were days Jacob's weak cries worried her so much she couldn't focus on anything else. The doctor told her Jacob would always be more fragile than his sister, and Sarah carried that worry in her chest like a stone. She fought for both of them, but inside she always feared losing him. Through it all, Ethan stood by quietly. When orders grew too large, he built shelves for her fabric. When Sarah was overwhelmed, he reminded her she wasn't alone. He never tried to take over, never tried to replace the role of father in her children's lives, but his presence was steady, and it gave Sarah the strength to keep pushing forward. Years passed, and Sarah transformed. The fragile woman who had once collapsed on a dirt road grew into someone stronger, someone who carried her scars with pride instead of shame. Jacob and Lily grew too. Jacob quieter, thoughtful, always clinging to his mother's side, and Lily bold, with her father's sharp features but her mother's fierce heart. And while Sarah built her life in silence, David's lies grew louder. He and Amanda flaunted their wealth, attending social events in Las Vegas, telling anyone who would listen that Sarah had abandoned them years ago. Sometimes Sarah heard their names on the radio or saw their faces in the paper, smiling as if they had no regrets. Each time, pain stabbed at her, but she held on to her promise. One day the truth would come. One day, she would step out of the shadows and show the world who she really was. But for now, she worked quietly, her hands stitching not just clothes but a future, her heart healing slowly, piece by fragile piece. And though she didn't know it yet, her chance to rise would come sooner than she expected. Through a man named Mark Thompson, a wealthy investor with an eye for resilience, who would one day see her work and change everything. Sarah never thought a stranger would be the one to open the door she had been knocking on in silence for years. But sometimes life doesn't give you answers in the places you expect. It was a late summer evening when it happened. The desert sun had just set, painting the Nevada sky with streaks of orange and purple. Sarah had packed the twins into bed and returned to her sewing machine, her hands moving almost by muscle memory. She was finishing a delicate little dress with embroidered roses when a notification buzzed on her phone. Another order. She smiled faintly. But this one looked different. The order was large. So large she thought it was a mistake. Dozens of pieces, baby clothes, blankets, even custom requests. Attached to the order was a note. "Your work has soul. Let's talk." The name at the bottom read, Mark Thompson. Sarah almost ignored it. Too many times she had been tricked into hope, only to watch it collapse. But something about the message felt real. The next day, after pacing back and forth for an hour, she finally wrote back a short, cautious reply. That was how Mark entered her life. Mark was a man in his 40s, a successful entrepreneur who had made a fortune in real estate and investments. But unlike David, Mark didn't wear his wealth like a crown. He carried it quietly, with a calm steadiness that made people listen when he spoke. He had stumbled upon Sarah's online shop through a friend who had ordered a blanket. He had been struck not just by the craftsmanship but by the way each piece seemed to carry warmth, as if the maker had poured herself into it. When he met Sarah in person, he saw something even more powerful. She was shy at first, her eyes still carrying the weight of old battles. But beneath that was strength. Mark recognized it instantly, the kind of strength that couldn't be bought, only earned through suffering. He told her plainly, "What you're doing isn't just sewing. It's building hope. And hope deserves to grow." Sarah didn't know how to respond. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. For years, people either pitied her or judged her. But here was someone who saw value in her work, not as charity but as potential. Mark offered to invest in her business. He wanted to help her turn Desert Rose Creations into something bigger, something that could reach beyond her little apartment. Sarah hesitated. The ghosts of her past whispered that trusting another man could only lead to betrayal. But Ethan, sitting quietly across the room that night as Sarah wrestled with the decision, said gently, "Maybe it's time you let someone believe in you. You've carried this alone long enough." Those words stayed with her. For years, Sarah had been surviving. But Mark's offer was more than survival. It was a chance to live again. Finally, she agreed. With Mark's support, Desert Rose Creations blossomed. He helped her secure a proper workshop in town, small but bright, with clean white walls and shelves stacked with colorful fabric. He hired a few assistants so Sarah wouldn't have to sew every single order herself. For the first time, she had time to breathe, to focus on design, to imagine a future without constantly worrying about bills. The twins thrived too. Jacob grew stronger with each passing year, though he still carried his quiet fragility, often clinging to Sarah's side. Lily, bold and energetic, loved running through the workshop, her laughter echoing between the walls. Everyone who came to visit fell in love with them, calling them the heart of the business. Sarah glowed with pride every time she saw their smiles. But with growth came attention. Local newspapers began writing about Desert Rose Creations, calling it a story of resilience and hope. Photographers snapped pictures of Sarah in her workshop, her hands busy with fabric, her children by her side. Soon people all over Nevada knew her name. She was no longer just the woman whispered about in grocery store aisles. She was the woman who had built beauty from ashes. And that attention reached places Sarah had never wanted it to. It reached David. When David first heard about Sarah's success, he laughed. He brushed it off as nothing more than a small-town project, hardly worth his time. But as months passed and Desert Rose Creations grew, his laughter turned into something darker. Sarah was no longer the silent, broken woman he had cast aside. She was standing, visible, respected. And that threatened the lies he had built. Because David had told everyone she had abandoned him, that she was unfit, unstable, incapable of raising children. But now the world was seeing a different Sarah, a mother, a creator, a survivor. And the cracks in his story began to show. Amanda noticed first. "People are talking about her," she said one evening as they sat in their polished living room in Las Vegas. "They admire her. They're starting to ask questions." David's jaw tightened. He hated the thought of losing control of the narrative. For years, he had painted Sarah as weak. Now she was becoming strong and, worse, admired. He knew if he didn't act, people would learn the truth that he had abandoned her, that he had chosen another woman over his own wife and unborn children. He couldn't let that happen. Meanwhile, Sarah's life was shifting in ways she never thought possible. She stood on stages at small business events, sharing her story in trembling but steady words. She didn't reveal the full truth, she wasn't ready yet, but she spoke about resilience, about starting over, about finding light in dark places. Her voice touched people because it was real. She wasn't selling perfection. She was offering hope. Mark stood proudly beside her, not overshadowing her but lifting her up. Ethan remained her anchor, still by her side in the quiet moments, still holding Jacob when he got sick, still fixing the little things around her workshop. Between the two men, Sarah found balance. Mark opening doors to the world, Ethan keeping her grounded at home. And yet, deep inside, Sarah carried fear. She knew David wasn't the kind of man to let go easily. She saw his face sometimes in her dreams, felt his cold eyes watching her. Each time she stepped onto a stage or into a spotlight, she wondered if he was out there, waiting. That fear became real one afternoon when she received a letter. It wasn't from a fan or a customer. It was from a lawyer. David was suing for custody. The words burned in her hands as she read them over and over. He wanted Jacob and Lily. He claimed Sarah had been unfit for years, that she had abandoned them, that she had no stable home until recently. He painted himself as the concerned father who only wanted what was best for his children. Sarah's knees buckled. She had fought through storms, rebuilt her life piece by piece, and now David was trying to rip away the very heart of it, her children. She called Ethan first. Her voice shook as she read the letter aloud. He came over immediately, his presence steady, his eyes filled with fire. "He won't win," Ethan said firmly. "Not this time. You're not the woman you were when he left you. You're stronger now." But Sarah wasn't so sure. David had money, power, connections. He had Amanda by his side, always smiling that cold smile. And most of all, he had the lies he had told for years. Lies people still believed. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt the ground slipping beneath her again. She looked at Jacob and Lily as they played on the floor, their laughter filling the room, and her chest ached with fear. She couldn't lose them. They were her everything. That night, as Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling, she thought about all the years she had stayed silent. Maybe her silence had been survival, but now it was a weapon David was using against her. The only way to fight was to speak. Her heart pounded as she whispered to herself in the dark. "It's time. It's time to tell the truth." The courtroom in Reno was cold, its walls lined with wood panels that seemed to swallow sound. Sarah sat on the bench with her hands trembling in her lap, Jacob and Lily absent but heavy in her heart. She wore a simple navy dress Mark had helped her pick out, nothing flashy, just enough to show dignity. Her lawyer, a woman named Rachel Meyer, sat beside her, reviewing notes with calm confidence. Across the aisle, David looked untouchable. He wore a sharp gray suit, his hair perfectly combed, Amanda sitting proudly next to him with her thin smile. To the judge and jury, they looked like the perfect couple, polished and composed. David even put on a faint mask of sorrow, as though this battle was breaking his heart. For a moment, Sarah felt small again, like the fragile woman lying on that road years ago. But then she remembered the faces of her children, their laughter, their trust, and she straightened her back. This wasn't about her. This was about them. The trial began. David's lawyer stood and spoke with practiced authority. He painted Sarah as unstable, irresponsible, and reckless. He claimed she had abandoned her husband and children, choosing to chase meaningless hobbies, while David and Amanda provided a stable, loving home. Each word was a knife, stabbing deeper into the scars she thought had healed. People in the courtroom shifted in their seats, nodding, whispering. Sarah felt the weight of their eyes, the judgment that had followed her for years. Her breath came shallow, panic creeping in. Then Rachel leaned toward her, whispering, "Breathe. Trust yourself. We have the truth." When it was Sarah's turn, she stood slowly. Her knees wobbled, but her voice, though shaky at first, grew steadier with every word. She told them everything. She spoke of the night on the highway, of the blood, of waking up alone in the hospital to find her husband gone. She described the betrayal of seeing Amanda at his side, the doors locked to her own home, the whispers in the town that she had abandoned her family when in truth she had been cast aside. Her voice cracked as she spoke of raising Jacob and Lily in that tiny apartment, of sewing late into the night while her babies slept, of scraping together money for food while people whispered lies about her in grocery store aisles. Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't stop. For the first time, she let her silence break. When she spoke of Jacob's fragility, of Lily's fierce spirit, of the nights she had rocked them both while her body ached from exhaustion, the courtroom grew quiet. Even those who had judged her before leaned forward, listening. Her pain was raw, but so was her love. It filled every word, undeniable, unstoppable. Ethan was called as a witness. He stood tall, his deep voice steady as he confirmed everything Sarah had said. He told the court about the nights he had come to help when she was too weak to lift the babies, about fixing her broken faucet, about watching her transform into the strongest mother he had ever known. She didn't abandon her children, he said firmly. She fought for them every single day. Alone. And she never gave up. Mark took the stand next, speaking not just as an investor but as a friend. He told them how he had seen her pour her soul into her work, how she had built something from nothing, not for money or recognition, but to give her children a better life. "I've worked with many people in my life," he said, looking directly at the judge. "Few have the courage she has. She deserves to keep her children, not just because she's their mother, but because she is their hope." David shifted uncomfortably as the tide turned. His mask of sorrow slipped, and anger flashed in his eyes. When he was questioned, cracks appeared in his story. He stumbled when asked why he had left Sarah in the hospital. He grew defensive when Rachel presented hospital records showing Sarah had been admitted with severe blood loss, abandoned without contact from her husband. Amanda tried to speak in his defense, but her words sounded hollow against the mountain of truth Sarah and her witnesses had built. The lies that had stood for years began to crumble, piece by piece, until David looked less like a grieving father and more like a man cornered by his own cruelty. By the time the closing arguments came, the courtroom no longer whispered about Sarah in doubt. They looked at her with respect, even awe. She wasn't the woman David had described. She was something far stronger, something he had never been able to break. The judge's verdict came slowly, each word heavy in the air. Custody will remain with the mother, Sarah Miller. The court finds her to be a capable, loving, and devoted parent. The claims made by Mr. Miller lack sufficient evidence and appear inconsistent with documented records. Sarah's breath caught. Her knees nearly buckled, but Ethan's hand steadied her, and tears streamed down her face. She had won. She had not only kept her children but also reclaimed the truth that had been stolen from her. David's face twisted with fury, Amanda gripping his arm as if to hold him back. But their power was gone. The lies were exposed, the masks shattered. For the first time in years, Sarah no longer feared his shadow. When she left the courtroom, reporters surrounded her, cameras flashing. Her heart raced, but she didn't hide. She stood tall, Jacob and Lily running into her arms, their small bodies clinging to her with laughter. She kissed their heads and whispered, "We're free now. We're finally free." The story spread across Nevada and beyond. Newspapers no longer called her the woman who abandoned her family. They called her the mother who never gave up. Desert Rose Creations flourished, not just as a business but as a symbol of resilience. People didn't just buy her clothes. They bought pieces of her story, her courage stitched into every seam. In time, Sarah's life settled into something she had once thought impossible: peace. She built her business, raised her children, and allowed herself to breathe without fear. Ethan remained by her side, steady and faithful. His love unspoken but undeniable. One evening, years later, under a Nevada sunset, Sarah finally allowed herself to lean into that love, not out of need but out of choice. David and Amanda faded into the background, their wealth unable to buy back the respect they had lost. And Sarah, the woman once broken and silenced, became a voice for others, speaking at shelters, supporting mothers who felt abandoned, reminding them that strength could grow in the most unlikely places. Her scars never disappeared, but she carried them with pride. They were proof of survival, proof that she had walked through fire and come out whole. And as she watched Jacob and Lily grow, Jacob thoughtful and kind, Lily bold and fearless, she knew that her story had not been written in the night David left her. It had been written in the nights she chose to fight, in the mornings she chose to rise, and in the moment she chose to speak the truth. Her journey had been long, filled with pain and betrayal. But in the end, it was also filled with hope, courage, and love. And that was the story she carried into the world, not as a victim, but as a survivor who had built beauty from ashes.